Hey guys, are you taking the SAT soon and trying to figure out what the heck you should do with your final few hours, moments, minutes, or whatever time you have left before the exam? If so, this video is for you. Before we get started, I want to recommend that everybody subscribe to our channel by clicking subscribe below this video and head to SupertutorTV.com/subscribe to subscribe to our mailing list. I also want to let you guys know that we are planning to release the best SAT prep course ever during or before the fall of 2018. So we will keep you posted on our progress on that if you subscribe. And in addition, we already have the best ACT prep course ever that is available for purchase at SupertutorTV.com. And it is me sharing all of my secrets that I give to all of my students with you guys. It's over 50 hours of video content, and it's a complete prep solution for the ACT. So go check it out if you're prepping for that. So as we get started here, I'm gonna break you guys into two categories first, in terms of what you should be doing the night before the SAT. The two categories are people who have not studied at all and people who've done some prep so far. If you're in that first group, I actually have a video that's geared toward you a little bit more, and that's called How to Cram for the SAT. So I recommend that you guys go check out that video. For the rest of you who've done a little bit of prep, even if that's just a few days or a week, or maybe you watched How to Cram for the SAT last week, and now you're like, oh my God, now what do I do the night before? For you guys, that's who this video really is for. I'm gonna give you guys 4 ideas of things that you should be thinking about and studying the night before the exam. Before I get into those 4 ideas, I'm first going to answer a frequently asked question that I get, which is, should I even study the night before the SAT, or should I relax and chill out and have a lemonade? And my answer to that is, do you study for your finals the night before? Yes? Surprising, isn't it? Well, this test is probably worth more than any final you've ever taken, 1. 2, this is not some sort of IQ test that you can't study for. It is something that you actually can study for. There is content on this test. So I totally advocate studying the night before the SAT. That doesn't mean that you should be staying up super late or spending 20 hours or not getting any sleep. Make sure you get sleep, make sure you're well fed, make sure you're well rested so that your brain cells are in fire mode. But there are some things you can do in those few hours that you have that evening before or the couple days before the test to make sure that you are as prepared as possible for the exam. The first tip that I have is to come up with a pacing strategy. One of the #1 issues that my students who are super prepped out to the max have when they show up for the SAT is that something happens inside of them. I would call it adrenaline. And when they show up, suddenly all of the patterns and habits and things that they're used to doing might be thrown out the window, and they have major pacing issues. What you need to guard against is that adrenaline and that intensity getting in the way of you getting the score you know you're capable of. So the best way to guard against the issues that really can tank you after having a lot of prep is to come up with a pacing strategy. And what I mean by that is that you have a strategy in place for yourself that you've already decided. You want to make the decision first is the idea, but that you've already decided what you're going to do if certain things happen. And what do I mean if certain things happen? Well, here's what certain things might be. You might be a student who's scoring awesomely on this test. You're getting almost everything right. And when you encounter a question, you're usually totally fine. You get to the real SAT, you're squeezing out, I have to get a 1550 or something like that. And you look at a question and suddenly the question makes no sense to you. And you're like, oh my God, this never happens. This is worse than any question I've ever seen on any SAT. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? And you start to freak out. And then you start to try to spend time on this question. And then you end up in this cycle of, I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. Oh my God, this is taking too long. And then you just get sucked into the vortex of a question, right? I want you to, in advance, make a decision about what you're going to do if you are confronted with things that freak you out, okay? Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that every time you see something that freaks you out, you should just skip it and move on. But you need to come up with a solution to how am I going to deal with this? And at what point are you going to let go? Okay? Because you have to finish the test on time and you cannot get too sucked into any question. For me, my rule is if I freak out on a question, I give myself maybe 60 seconds to 2 minutes to deal with that question. If at that point I still can't get it, I just move on. And I've made that decision before I even get into the exam room that I have to leave time. I have to pace myself so that I have 5 minutes left at the end. Then in that 5 minutes left at the end, I can come back and look at those things that freaked me out. What's cool about the SAT, which is different from the ACT, is that it's much more generous with time than the ACT. So that means that you can usually, most of my students, and it's not everybody, but most of my students can try to pace themselves to the point where they have a couple of minutes at least left at the very end. Now, that being said, even if this pacing strategy means that you're going to have to abandon some questions that are freaking you out a little bit, I want you to be okay with that. I want you to decide in advance, you know what, even if a question freaks me out, that's okay. I've made my game plan. My game plan is I get 2 minutes max on this freaked me out question, and then I have to move on. Or even 1 minute max, or 1.5 minutes max, depending on which section you're on, right? The different sections have a different time allotment per question. And what I advise you guys to do is go through all those sections, do a little bit of math, figure out how much time you should be spending on each question for your own personal pacing strategy, and make a plan, okay? Get out your pencil, do a little math, figure out how much time do I have per question in the math section. The other thing to remember though is, like in the math section, your harder questions are gonna come later, your easier questions are gonna come earlier. Obviously, you're probably going to need more time on those later questions and not on the earlier ones. So as you create your little pacing strategy, that's what I want you to think about. Number 2, the other thing that I like to do the night before the test is to go over my mistakes on previous tests. I know you've probably already done this some, you've probably already gone over your test if you're self-studying, but the night before is a great time to just go over some of that again and ask yourself, what was the mistake that I made? Why did I make that mistake? How could I not do that again? Because if you go over your mistakes, that's gonna front load for you all the little things that you need to be extra careful about. Number 3, which is related to number 2, the night before the SAT, I also recommend that you try to rework some problems that you've missed in the past. So in addition to going over those problems and marking down your mistakes and remembering like how to get things right, you can also even rework problems. This is particularly helpful in the math section, I think. And you can just try to rework them, especially if you've been prepping for a long time. Sometimes what I find is useful is go back to those tests you took 3 months ago or a month ago and pick up some of those problems from that math section at the end that were really hard and just rework them. It gives you a little bit of confidence because most of the time, if you've seen an exact problem before, you can solve it again. But it also reminds you of the pathways of problem solving that are similar to the kind of pathways you're going to have to engage in on the exam tomorrow or the next day. And then finally, number 4, review concepts that you know are always a challenge. What does that look like? Well, let's say in math you have trouble with exponential growth and that formula always is your nemesis and you can never remember that interest formula. Well, review the interest formula, review the formula for exponential growth and exponential decay. You can also do this with grammar. If you always screw up colon use and that's super confusing for you, look up the rules on colons, remind yourself of what they are, remind yourself of the comma rules. If there's anything grammatically that sometimes throws you, work on that. If the where is the best placement for this sentence question throws you, try to find some of those on Khan Academy passages and just skip over the other questions and just do those, the ones that you struggle with. Those are a good thing to review tonight because you have the time and it's content. So those are the kind of things that you have to bring to the table with this exam. That's about it. I hope you guys like this video. If so, please give it a thumbs up. I wish you guys the best of luck on the SAT tomorrow or the next day or whenever you're taking it. We have lots of videos that are all about this journey of getting into college. It's not just test prep. Hopefully you can subscribe. You can also follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram and find us on Facebook. I hope you guys have a good night of studying and a good night of sleep, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.